Okay, so as always, it's good to do the parent-son learning. This time, Ray Ginsburg instructed me that as we are not so long from Purim, we should be Purim-themed, which makes sense. If anyone watching has questions, so Daniel is standing by to relay the questions. Don't knock over the computer. Good? Okay. So I want to try to understand the nature of the mitzvot of Purim and see if we can tease out an organizing theme to the mitzvot of Purim and then see some expressions of this theme in halacha. But I want to frame it with a enigmatic, very simple introduction of the Rambam on Hilchot Purim. So the Rambam has, at the end of Hilchot Zmanim, has Hilchot Megillah v'Chanukah, the laws of Chanukah and Purim. He writes there, Yesh b'chalan shtei mitzvot aseh midivrei sofrim ve'eno min haminyan. Counted in the section of Megillah and Chanukah, there are two rabbinic mitzvot. Now, not two rabbinic mitzvot total, meaning in Megillah and Chanukah, there are two rabbinic mitzvot detailed in those chapters. One of those is the lighting of the Chanukah candles, which means that we're left with one mitzvah for Purim. So right off the bat, what's the problem?
There are more than one.
There's four, right? There are four. What are the four? Very good.
How do you know there are four?
What? Because I just counted them, right? Because I counted them. There's Megillah, Matanot, Lev Yonim, Mishlach, Manot, and Suda.
Four obligations.
Oh, good. There are four obligations. There are four rabbinic, right? There are four rabbinic mitzvot. Now, presumably the Rambam, when it comes to rabbinic mitzvot, does not have all the very, very, very detailed rules that he has of counting mitzvot aseh deoraita. There, if anyone remembers, if anyone's gone through the Shorashim are quite lengthy. We did one of them earlier in the year, if you were in my shir. Actually, this was when I had both shirim, so anyone who came, that was both shirim when we did the Rambam Shoresh on, right, when he talks about Tchelet and Lava and the integrated, etc. No, you went to Ruchai Moshe that day. Yeah. It's okay. I mean, I'm just saying, wasn't it? Okay. That is a respectable thing to do. I don't understand. Okay. So, we have this problem, right? The Rambam says that there is one mitzvah on Purim, but we know that there are four. Now, many of the Achronim have noted this problem, but tell me conceptually, what is the simplest way of dealing with this issue? Yes, is contend that somehow they are conceptually unified, that they are conceptually indeed one. If you didn't know the Rambam, though, how would you have categorized the mitzvot of Purim? How many mitzvot would you have counted? In my head, I have two possibilities. Neither of them are what the Rambam did.
4 or 2.
4 or 2. Right, 4 is easy. Why would you say 4? There are 4 separate ones. If you had to divide them into 2, what would the 2 be?
Megillah and everything else.
Yeah, Megillah and everything else. Megillah and everything else. Why would you say Megillah and everything else?
One's a Kriya, and one's like a social kind of like...
Okay, right, so one possibility is one is a Kriya, one is social things, but let's try to push it farther. I would have said it slightly differently. I would have said one is the mitzvah of Kriya, which is a kiyum of Pesumei Nisa, but it's a din Kriya Aksuvim, let's say. And the other 3, I wouldn't say it's social, but I would look to the Megillah and I would say it's a kiyum of one one phrase, which is Yemei Mishteh V'Simcha, right? Which is the description that the Megillah gives to Purim. And why would I have said that the other 3 are a fulfillment of this concept called Yemei Mishteh V'Simcha, days of celebration and happiness? Why would I have linked those 3? Thank you. The pasuk does it. Very good. Thank you, Yeshua. That's usually the answer, right? Because if you look at number 7 for a moment, these are the psukim from Esther. The last pasuk there, Kayamim asher nachu vahem hayudim me'oivehem v'achodesh asher na'apach lahem miyagon l'simcha u'me'eva liyom tov. The days where the Jews rested from their enemies, the month which was turned into them from sorrow to gladness, and from mourning into a good day, into a holiday. la'asot otam yemei mishteh v'simcha, to make them into days of feasting and gladness, u'mishloach manot ish l're'ehu matanot la'avyonim, and sending portions, mishloach manot, to each other, and gifts to the poor. And if I knew anything about halacha, it would be reflected, because matanot la'avyonim, how much money do you have to give?
2 anis worth. 2 meals worth.
No, you have to give to 2 poor people. What do you have to give them?
The amount.
Enough for the meal.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning matanot levyonim is conceptually linked to the meal because you have to provide for their meal. Mishloach manot in the Gemara. What is the classic mishloach manot in the Gemara? Meal, where people swapped su'udot. Right? That they sent their su'udat purim to each other. But the easiest way to fulfill mishloach manot limahadrin is you go to somebody else's su'udah and you bring whatever. You bring the bread, you bring a kugel, you bring a salad. I mean, you bring real food as part of the su'udah. That's the easiest. Well, not at your age, right? Not in yeshiva. In yeshiva, don't do that. But like, you know, eventually, if you have su'udah with other people, that's just the easiest way, right? You swap, whatever. Right? It's very easy. So I either would have said there are 4 mitzvot because they're just separate acts. Reading the Megillah, giving gifts to the poor, giving gifts to each other, or the meal. Or I would have said that there are 2 mitzvot. There's the Megillah, and then there's the other 3, which all in some way create the opportunity to have a festive meal and atmosphere. But what I would not have done is what the Rambam did, which is argued that there is only 1 mitzvah. But here's the problem. If I asked you now, okay, there's 1 mitzvah. What is the mitzvah? What is the common denominator? What is the fundamental principle that unites the 4 acts that one is obligated to do on Purim? So, what would you say? Without the sources. Before you get to the sources, what would you have said?
The Megillah itself. Because the other 3 are in it, and then the Megillah itself is...
Well, okay, well, how are they all linked to the Megillah? How would you have said that? So you could say Pirsumei Nisa. Now, why would you say Pirsumei Nisa?
They're all because of a nace. They're all like that.
Well, here's how I would go about it logically. I would say as follows. The Rambam says there's only 1 mitzvah. And when it comes to the 4 acts that one is obligated to do on Purim, the Gemara never tells me the rationale for 3 of them. But the Gemara tells me the rationale for 1 of them, namely Megillah. But if I didn't know that, so I could have followed a different logical process, which is 3 of them are clearly about Simcha.
So the other one's also.
So maybe Megillah is already about Simcha, right? That's what I could have done. But the reason I'm not going to methodologically is because the Rambam says 4 of them are united conceptually, because they're only 1 mitzvah. Point 1. Point 2 is that the Gemara tells me, at least 1 of them, what the guiding principle is. So now I'm stuck. Because if I want to unite them, and I have evidence, which is dispositive, that tells me the guiding principle of 1 of them, so now, methodologically speaking, my goal is to explain, even if it's counterintuitive, how that 1 principle that I know exists in Megillah permeates the other 3, even though I might not have known. So first, let's prove it. So the Gemara in number 2 tells you the following: Boy Rava, Mikra Megillah umeit mitzvah haiminayu adif. If I have a choice between reading the Megillah or burying a meit mitzvah, what's a meit mitzvah? A dead person has no one else to bury him, which takes precedence. And what's the Gemara's logic? Because normally meit mitzvah trumps all. So why would you even think that Megillah would override meit mitzvah? So the Gemara says, Mikra Megillah adif mishum pirsumei nisa. Oh, Dilma meit mitzvah adif mishum kavod habriot. Do you say that Megillah takes precedence because of this guiding rule, which is that the function of the Megillah is to publicize the miracle, and that has some meta value to tell the world about that which God did? For those of you who are doing Daf Yomi, you know that basically half of the 9th parak of brachot is about this in different variations. All the different brachot we say. If a miracle happened to me, if a miracle happened to my ancestors, right? You say these brachot all the time. This is like a meta theme. It's not just in its intense forms on Hanukkah and Purim, but it's always a value. Or do you say that you bury the dead person because of the other uber value, which is kavod habriot, human dignity, which, as the Gemara in Brachot tells you, where are my daf yomi guys? Gemara in Brachot, daf yutet. Gadol kavod habriot shedocheh la'otaseh Shabbat Torah. Right? Human dignity is so great that it overrides a prohibition in the Torah, which then the Gemara backtracked and says, no, it means lav de lo tasur. It means the violation of rabbinic law. But as Rav Luchamsi notes in his article Ma'anosh, rhetoric is meaningful, and you can't take away the fact that the Gemara used very strong rhetoric. It clearly is trying to make a point. So the Gemara then answers, Bater debaya adar pashta mitzvah adif damar gadol kol v'rabriot shedocheh lo taseh Shabbat Torah. Invoking that Gemara in Brachot, we say that if you have a choice, you're on your way to read the Megillah, and I don't know why this would happen in Modi'in, but there is, God forbid, a dead body there who has no relatives, and you have to bury it. Where? I don't know. Probably sketchier, right? If you find a dead body, probably call the police. Not okay. Fine. That's if you find a dead. That's my halachal ma'aseh psak. If you find a dead body on the street, I'm like emak achula, call the police. Don't just bury it in the park and assume it's a maid mitzvah. Okay, that's my psak halachal ma'aseh. If anyone disagrees with that, you can talk to me later. But so we know that the guiding principle of Megillah is Pirsumei Nisa, is that there's a value in publicizing the miracle. And the value of Megillah as an expression of Pirsumei Nisa is manifest in many of the halachot. So for example, the Shulchan Aruch tells us in number 3 that who are you supposed to bring to the reading of the Megillah that you might not have thought you're supposed to bring? Children. Now, as hard as it is to be yotzei, to fulfill your obligation of Megillah when kids are there, it's a good thing to bring them. How you deal with that, with being yotzei, figure it out. Get the right balkarei, who knows how to stop, who's very loud. You know, in my shul growing up, they had the traffic light. They had an actual traffic light. Yeah, it's the best.
This is not the yellow light.
What?
Without the yellow light.
No, we had a yellow light.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, the yellow light, not like the Israeli yellow light, which goes at the same time as the red light, right? So, right, you have yellow lights in both, not like that. But a normal one where there were 3 colors, not, I don't understand. And the Mishnah Berurah says, what's the guiding principle? Why is it that we bring children, even though they're not formally obligated, in Mikra Megillah? Why do we bring them to shul to hear the Megillah? Pirsumei Nisa. Kedei lechancham b'mitzvot, Pirsumei Nisa. And he says, this principle of publicizing the miracles is also why we read a few psukim out loud to make sure you don't fall asleep. This is not new. People fall asleep during laning. This is not new. I know it's never happened to any of you, ever. I get it. I know. But the Mishnah Berurah said that... What? I know. We've never fallen asleep in Shir. We've never fallen asleep in Kriyat Torah.
You're saying you can't fall asleep during Kriyat Torah or Shir if you're not there.
That's not a good defense. Yes, if I sleep through it, then I didn't fall asleep during it. I get it. Okay. And the Mishnah Berurah writes that's also part of it. To wake up the kids, to wake up the adults. So we read the 4 psukim. Umordechai yatsa, va'ish Yehudi. What?
I thought we were listing them.
What?
I thought we were listing them.
Go ahead. The Mishnah Berurah lists them. What are they?
Oh, right. We just did them.
Yes.
Yeshua, Mordechai Yatsa, Leidimata, and the one at the end that I remember.
Yes, exactly.
What's the one at the end though?
Ki Mordechai.
Oh yeah, that one.
Ki Mordechai, yeah. So I understand, Megillah is about Pirsumei Nisa. But if you'd asked me simply, I would have said that the other 3 are about Simcha. I mean, that's what the Megillah said they were. Yemei Mishtah v'Simcha. So, you now have 2 options. You can either say, there are indeed two mitzvot. There are two values here. Pirsumei Nisa and Simcha, and say the Rambam, we just don't paskin like the Rambam. That would be easy. These are conceptually distinct. But if you want to understand the Rambam, then, well, it's very simple, right? This is very simple logic, right? If A equals B and B equals C, then A must equal C. Right?
Yeah.
This is very simple logic here, right? So if now technically that's not actually the logic that I'm using. It's if A is included within category B and C is included within category B, then okay. But for our purposes, A equals B, B equals C, A equals C. Okay, for our purposes, technically not accurate, but that's not the point. Okay, but if they're all the same mitzvah and Megillah is clearly Pirsumei Nisa, then you need to explain how the other three, which according to the psukim in Esther are Mishteh v'Simcha, that their function is joy, feasting and joy, which at first glance does not sound like publicizing the miracle. Somehow you need to explain how that is publicizing the miracle. And here's where I think suddenly we have to rethink what we mean about Pirsumei Nisa. Because if I asked you, if you only knew Megillah, and you only knew that that was the mitzvah, that was mefarsem the nes, that publicized the miracle, so what would you tell me is the nature of Pirsumei Nisa? How do you do it? You talk about it. Right? You exude excitement as you tell over the content of the miracle. You publicize it. Right? You declare. You make a public declaration. This is what God did. It's a little bit complicated because, all those examples in the Gemara and Brachot, I understand how those are Pirsumei Nisa, because you say, Baruch Atah Hashem, you thank God, and then you say, Sha'asa Nes B'makom Hazeh. That's a little bit hard by the Megillah, because we don't mention God for 10 prakim. So, whatever, by implication, you're Mefarsem the Nes. I've mentioned to a few people, it's worth at some point in your life reading the sectarian versions of the Megillah, because in the non-rabbinic tradition of the Megillah, every time God should be there, He is. Right? And then you see how much we actually take God out of the Megillah in a very sort of visceral way. But nonetheless, the context makes it clear that we believe that this is divinely inspired, and therefore it's Mefarsem the Nes. But in what sense could you argue that Mishteh v'Simcha, that joy, rejoicing, feasting, is a fulfillment or an expression of Pirsumei Nisa? So, years ago, I came across this source in Rabbeinu Yonah that I thought was the key to equating these two, equating Pirsumei Nisa with Mishteh v'Simcha. He's not talking about Purim, but as we'll see, what he says explicitly, not in the context of Purim, is implied in the context of Purim by both Meiri, who is at least a somewhat quoted Rishon, and the Erkei Tanaim, which... Yeah, exactly. He's one of the Balei Tosfot. I forget which one he is. Yechusei Tanaim v'Maraim is Rabbi Yochanan ben Kalanamus. I forget if the Erkei Tanaim is the same person or someone else in that circle in Germany. It's one of these... It might be this, or it's another name for the same book. I forget. I think it might be the Rivak also. It's if it's the same as Yechusei Tanaim v'Maraim, which again I think it is, but I could be wrong. It's a very strange book. It basically organizes the Chidushim and Shas by the name of the person who said it.
Oh man.
It's a fascinating work. But let me read your Rabbeinu Yonah. So the Gemara in Brachot, again, my Daf Yomi people, the Gemara in Lamed Aleph has a very surprising halacha. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum ben Yochai, Asur la'adam she'imalei schok piv ba'olam hazeh. It is forbidden for someone to fill his mouth with laughter in this world. Shne Amar, az imalei schok pinu ulshonenu rina. Then our mouths will be filled with laughter and our tongues with joy. Eimatai, when? Bisman she'omru bagoyim migdil Hashem la'asot im eileh. Now there is a machloket amongst Rishonim. What does this mean? Does that mean that now we can't be full of joy, but in the time of Mashiach we can? Or now you can't be full of joy, but in the world to come you can? And then there is a lengthy discussion in Poskim This is actually in poskim of what does it mean? Are you not allowed to be happy? You can't be overly happy. You can't fill your mouth with joy, but you can be joyous. You can laugh, but you can't be rolling on the floor laughing. I mean, it's like this endless, very complicated, very strange, very, very strange discussion. You even, in the weirdest one, I don't know if you guys remember, I think we did this in Adar last year, and Agadat this year, but you have that machlokes, that Gemara in Nida, where they try to get, I think it's Rabbi Zera to laugh, and Rashi says, because he held you're not allowed to laugh, and everyone else didn't, so they tried to trip him up and get him to laugh. So it's a very weird halacha in all of Shas. It's a very, very strange. What? It's a great, we did this last year, humor in the Talmud. We did slapstick in the Talmud, and irony in the Talmud. What?
Why are we not doing that this year?
Because we did last year.
Like,
I feel like Nate would dafka like the slapstick Gemara. Like that's, right?
That's why
He's like, what? Slapstick Gemara? There's slapstick in the Gemara? Yes, there's slapstick in the Gemara. Okay, I'll tell it to you in honor of Purim. Just for you, Nate, okay? The Gemara in Bava Kama Lamed Zayin tells a story of someone who punches someone in the face, and he owes him half a zuz. So he tries to pay him with a whole zuz, which was a little bit cracked, and try to get change. The guy didn't want to give him change, so what did he do? He punched him in the other cheek and gave him the whole zuz. Right? That is a classic. Right? That is right. That is clearly slapstick. Right? That is undeniably slapstick. I thank Rabbi Yitzi Blau for that reference. I would not have thought of it, but that's clearly what the Gemara is doing. So anyways, but on the Gemara in Brachot, Rabbeinu Yonah comments as follows. So he argues that this Gemara isn't about this world versus the next world. It's about this. It's about now until the time of Mashiach. And he says why? When will our mouths be filled with laughter and joy be permitted? Mizman sheyaseh imanu nisim. When God will perform miracles, v'yosheinu, and save us. V'az ba'oto hazman nismach kidei ligalot nifleotav u'gvurotav. So what does he say? We will rejoice. Why? Kidei. What's kidei? So that. Meaning, our joy is instrumental. To do what? Kidei ligalot nifleotav u'gvurotav v'yomru hagoyim higdil Hashem lasod emeleh. To reveal His wonders and His miracles, so that the nations will say, God has done great with these. V'yir'u b'simchatenu v'yevoshu. They'll see our joy and be ashamed. V'simcha kazo shehi simchat haborei hi mitzvah gdola mishum pirsumei nisa. And that type of joy is a great mitzvah of pirsumei nisa. And then he gives you a beautiful midrash to capture this. I'll say this outside, but the Midrash says in a pasuk that we know, it's in Tehillim, but we know it from Hallel, which is all prakim from Tehillim, but you knew that. Zeh hayom asa Adonai nagila v'nismechavo. This is the day that God has made. Now, there's an ambiguity. Nagila, let us rejoice. V'nismecha, also rejoice. Vo, in So the Midrash and Shir Hashirim Rabbah notes that there's an ambiguity. Nismecha either, because there are two possible subjects here, or objects. Nismecha vo, meaning bayom, rejoice on the day, or vo bakadosh baruch hu. Because it's zeh hayom asa Hashem. So is bo going back on Hashem, or is bo going back on Yom? Is going back on God or on the day? So the Midrash says it's going back on God. And therefore, Rabbeinu Yonah says the rejoicing is bavur Hashem lefarsem et kol hagdolot ve'et kol harot shu oseh imanu. So what is Rabbeinu Yonah's theory? Again, he doesn't say this in Purim, but what's his theory about joy that is a reaction to miracles?
It expresses things. It's a piercing of the names.
In what sense? So now let's try to pin it down. In what sense is it a pirsum on names? Because I understand why Megillah is a pirsum. I'm talking about the miracle. Why is joy as a reaction to miracles, a Pirsum Hanes. In what sense is that publicizing the miracle?
It encourages you to do it more.
To do what more?
To have more joy and therefore publicize it further.
So it could be that it's motivational, right? That it will get you to talk about the miracles. Yeah.
If you hold of the idea that when it says that Az Yamale Salpinu, that your miracle will be fulfilled after the miracles, then you're saying this is a miracle, and this was the miracle that happened.
Exactly. Right? I think that's what Ben Yonah is getting at. Which is, the reason you're rejoicing is because, and this is important in the Megillah. Because remember what I said before about the Megillah? If you read the Megillah, it doesn't say God. And therefore, if you didn't celebrate it, l'shem mitzvah, then what might people think?
You're just celebrating in this.
That you don't believe that it was a miracle, or you don't internalize, there's no one to thank, because it was the chance of history. By rejoicing, meaning rejoicing in a way that reflects that you're thanking God, you contextualize, and you internalize, and you reflect that you believe that the salvation that you had was a miracle, which is not clear from reading the Megillah. Reading the Megillah tells the story, the content. But in order for it to be successfully Pirsum Hanes, you need to make it clear that you perceive this as a miracle. That you're thanking someone, that you're rejoicing in the fact that it was an act of God. And therefore, it's not enough to just tell the story. You need to do something that reflects that you have actually internalized the reality that what happened wasn't by chance, was indeed a miracle. And therefore, the joy itself, when someone makes a su'udat hoda'ah, it contextualizes their non-miracle as a miracle. If somebody has a child, they're happy. If somebody celebrates having a child, let's say a daughter where there's not a formal chiyuv of a bris, okay, fine, with a su'udat hoda'ah, where they say divrei Torah, they thank God, they get up, they say divrei Torah, I'd like to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they indicate to everybody that they believe that the miracle of nature of having a child is exactly what I just said, is a miracle. Right? Is an expression of godliness. And therefore, in order to be mefarsem the nates, it's not enough to just tell the story, you need to reflect a particular perspective on the story. But I'll push it farther. Let's say you don't rejoice. Let's say you aren't happy. What does that indicate? Yeah, meaning it's not just, I don't think you could have it without that. Meaning if you really believe that God intervened in history, however he does that, to save you, you would be happy. You would be grateful. If you're not, and you're just verbalizing the words, you're just telling the story, but someone looks at you and they cannot tell that you appreciate what happened, there is something lacking. They won't really believe that you believe that this was a miracle. Meaning in order to properly tell the story, internalize it, think about it in Pesach terms. In Pesach terms, this is what we say. That it's not enough to tell the story. Chayav adam lirot or laharot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mitzrayim. If you just tell the story, but you don't get to the point where you imagine that you were part of it, you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah, because telling the story is only part of bringing yourself to experience. And I think that's the logic behind the Rambam saying that all the mitzvot are one. They're Pirsume Nisa. Because there are different ways of Mafaris the Menesh. One is by relaying the content, but the other is by internalizing the reality that it was a miracle and allowing that to express, or naturally expressing the emotions that would come from a deep-seated belief that God did something for me. And if you look Rabbeinu Yonah, like I said, says this not in the context of Purim. But if you want proof of people who said it in the context of Purim, so let's continue here to number 8. The Gemara in Psachim, Samaches, has a interesting conversation. There the Gemara records that there were certain people who fasted all year long, every day. And there were certain exceptions in which they thought you couldn't fast. They thought you could fast on Shabbos, but there were certain days you couldn't fast. Some of them are surprising, like Shavuot. That's a story for Shavuot. I think we talked about it last year. That Hakol Modim Batzeret Debina Nami Lachem. But Rabbi Yosef says that Hakol Modim Bipurim Debina Nami Lachem. Even if you think you're allowed to fast every day of the year, including Yom Tov, but because on Yom Tov there's a machloket in the Gemara whether, well, you guys tell me. So the Gemara, the Psukim, one pasuk describes Yom Tov as it being for God, and one describes it as being for you. So there's a machloket. One day is Chatzi Lachem, Chatzi Lashem, Chatzi Lachem. The other is O Kula Lashem, O Kula Lachem. Either half and half, or you have a choice, either totally God or totally you. But the Gemara says that Rabbi Yosef argues that on Purim everyone needs Lachem. You need to eat and celebrate. You can't fast and just sit and learn and read the Megillah over and say Divrei Torah about Purim and just do that all day and say, I don't want to do that, I don't want to eat, I don't want to do Mishloach Mana, I'll do Mishloach Mana, but I won't eat. I'll send food to everybody else and I'll learn the whole day. You can't do that. Why not? My taima, Yemei Mishteh v'Simcha K'tiv Bey, because it says in the pasuk that Purim is defined as days of rejoicing and feasting. So if you look at the Meiri there, the Meiri says, what does that mean? Yom Purim Mishum Pirsumei Nisa. Why do you need to eat on Purim? Because of Pirsumei Nisa. So the Meiri says explicitly that eating on Purim, the feast on Purim itself, is the Pirsum Hanes. Now, by the way, this manifests itself in different ways. So, for example, the poskim write that drinking, whatever extent you think that's a chiyuv, and you know my opinion that there is no mitzvah to get drunk. I have said that on record many times. But the extent that you should have wine at the meal, the poskim note that it should be specifically wine. Because, why wine?
It's for feasting.
No. Because that's what they drank in Sudas Achashverosh. And therefore, by having wine, it's part of telling the story. It's part of remembering that moment. So even within the Suda, even what you eat and what you drink is colored by this notion that you're supposed to be telling the story, experiencing the story, reflecting the story in action. And if you look at the Erkei Tanoim, in 2 passages, these are both found, if you're looking in the Torah Rishonim, which is that there's a brown set of books from the Mossad of Kook. I think on Pesachim there are 5 volumes, so I think it's volume 4. And it like organizes all these random Rishonim al Seder Hadaf. That's how I found this. I didn't actually go through the entire Erkei Tanaim Memoraim to like comb through it to find Chidushim. I have Rebbeim who did that, but I remember one shir of Rosenzweig coming in, and like after weeks of doing a sugya, he's like, I just want to read through 3 blot of the Shita Mikubetset in Ksubos and just show how our lumdus fits into every Shita in the Rishonim, and we just like went through. I don't know that much. I can't do that. I'm not capable of it. What?
I'll give you a year and then you got it.
Yeah, okay, thanks. But the Erkei Tanoim writes as follows: Purim. Mevarchin Mishat Kriyat Megillah Megillah Nisim Shechayanu Rashi Tevot, right? Manach Rashi Tevot Megillah Nisim Shechayanu. 3 brachot. Amikra Megillah Shasa Nisim Shechayanu. V'afal pi she'ikar hakarato b'su'uda. And now he says something amazing. He says, if I asked you, okay, maybe all these mitzvot are Pirsumei Nisa, which one is the primary? So what would you have said? I would have said that too. But the Erkei Tanaim didn't. And he says, She'ikar hakarato ba'seuda. The primary recognition is during the meal. Kiddichtiv, and he has a pasuk to back him up, which is, La'asot otam yimei mishtev v'simcha mishloach manot. Because that's the way the Megillah describes Purim, not as the day of the Megillah, but as Yimei Mishtev V'Simcha. A simple read of the pasuk says that the definition of the day is Yimei Mishtev V'Simcha. Mikra Megillah is something we do on the day, but rejoicing is the day. The Seudah is the day. Afal Pichein. So he said, so why don't I make a bracha at the Seudah? If that's the Ikar, so you should make a bracha at the Seudah. It says, Ein mevarchim b'shat sheyoshvin l'kayim Seudat Purim v'lo bizman. L'fi shechanukah Purim shum kedusha noheg b'hem en ikar hanes lo b'yom v'lo b'Seudah u'kriyan ha-Megillah b'Purim ikar takana la'akar hanes. So he says, because from the meal itself, it wouldn't be evident that there was a miracle, so you need the ikar takana, which is the Megillah. So he sort of goes back and forth, meaning at a certain level, it's really about the meal. But if you didn't have the Megillah, you wouldn't know. Right? You need both, meaning you need the Megillah. The way I would put it is you need the Megillah to provide the content, and once you have the content, so then it contextualizes the rejoicing, and then the rejoicing deepens the belief that this was a miracle. And the combination of the two is Pirsum Hanes. But that means, to put it differently, Pirsum Hanes is not fundamentally a din in the Maisa HaMitzvah, as I would say. It's not a law. It's not an expression in the Masa Mitzvah. The fundamental Pirsum Hanes is a state of being. Purim is a day in which your state of being is one of being Mefarsem the Nes. And you do that in two ways. By contextualizing it through Mikra Megillah, and by internalizing it through the other three that make the day into Yemei Mishtev V'Simcha. So you are a walking, breathing, rejoicing Pirsum Hanes. Right? You are a banner for godliness. On Purim, that's the mitzvah. To create Yemei Mishtev V'Simcha. Yeah, all right.
Why is it that the Seudah cannot emphasize the miracle itself?
Because we do Seudas for a lot of things. But that's the problem.
Why is it that one of these things is publicizing the miracle?
It can, but you need to contextualize it.
So why don't we have like a Purim Seder?
That is the rule.
So that's his argument, is we do. We don't have Seder, we have Megillah, which contextualizes it, and then you go to your
Just
Seudah.
have this one thing, like have like a Purim Haggadah, and just
It's a kasha.
One of you. Why don't we have this idea of Yemei Mishtev V'Simcha Chanukah? Wouldn't that be, if you need this to be Mefarsim the names, then?
Good. So, by Hanukkah, it's interesting, because by Hanukkah, it really does seem to be that the Pirsum is only through the candles, right? It's not, doesn't have a halacha. Even though, well, no, I'll take that back. That's what I would have said, except according to the Rambam, what's the Ikar Mitzvah on Hanukkah? The Ikar Mitzvah is the menorah, but what is the definition of the day according to the Rambam? Hallel. Right, meaning we do have it. Remember that we did this pre-Hanukkah, right? It was that the Rambam says that the definition of the day is Hallel, which is essentially the exact same thing. Because remember, the Gemara equates which two things? Halav and Megillah. Right? Kriyasa Ze'ilula, that's Rava's position. So I think we do. Meaning, but by Hanukkah, it expresses itself in 8 days of Hallel.
Well, yeah, I guess why don't we have the Seudah?
So that's the Bach's argument, right? The Bach's argument is because Hanukkah is a fundamentally spiritual miracle, and Purim is fundamentally physical, because one, we were saved from annihilation, the other, we were saved from assimilation, and therefore the nature of the Pirsum Hanes in each one must be reflective of the type of miracle that it was. On Purim, which is completely physical, the central celebration has to be physical. On Hanukkah, where the main miracle was we were saved from assimilation, we express it through Hallel. Right? That's the Bach's argument. And I think that would be the answer, is that they're both true, except it has to be reflective. But I think that point is important, because it's not random. Right? The nature in which you rejoice has to, in some way, encapsulate what you're celebrating in order for it to be an effective way of communicating to the world the nature of the miracle. If you look at 11, he says it in another place. Upurim nami mishum pirsum einisa dehamarabba sudat purim shachal b'layla lo yatsa va'ikar tzarich levaresh unasa b'shilach manot b'harba tova kimatan lavyonim minei machol v'zeu bayom. Where he makes this point explicitly that it has to be during the day, which is the time of Purim-R, when you do the meal, etc. And I think fundamentally, this is again how you explain the Rambam. That for the Rambam there really is only one mitzvah, and that is Purim-R. It's just that there are two components to it. One is contextualizing it, the other is internalizing the belief that God really saved us, and that should lead you to joy, because otherwise you don't really believe it. And therefore the combination of the Megillah and the three mitzvot that make it Yemei Mishteh V'Simcha together are a mitzvah of Purim-R. Yeah.
Is joy a means to an end of pursuing Nisa, or is joy literally pursuing Nisa?
I don't know, right? Meaning, the Rabbeinu Yonah says it's Kedei Lefarseim Hanes.
Like it.
It's in order to, which makes it sound instrumental, that joy is the means by which we do, but on the other hand, the Midrash he quotes, Nagila v'nis mechavo, it's hard to say that rejoicing in God is only instrumental. Right? It's hard to say, right? Meaning his language is instrumental. But on the other hand, if what you're doing is rejoicing in God, like you're really appreciating what God did for you, it's hard to say that. Now I will just point out, I cut out these sources in the end to save time, but I've mentioned this before, that the Chassam Sofer in 2 Tshuvot argues that the notion that you have to celebrate in some way for any miracle that happened to you is not rabbinic, it's biblical. And therefore Chanukah and Purim are fundamentally biblical mitzvot. The particulars are rabbinic. But the notion that every time God performs a miracle for you, you must find a way to thank Him and celebrate is biblical. And if you remember, we did this, I think this was one of our Skype shirim last year on Hanukkah. Only Zev would remember this, I think. Zev, I think, was there, but I'm not sure. Right? Where the religious Zionist poskim in the 50s argued that that's why saying Halal and Yom Ha'atzmaut was a kiyum of the biblical obligation, which we learned from the Chassam Sofer by Purim. But that, I'll throw that out to share for another time. In the next few sources, which I didn't translate, I want to show you quickly go through another halachic expression of this, and that is the following question of what happens when you have other celebrations that take place on Purim. How do you deal with integrating them into the Suda, and can you? So let's look quickly. The Yerushalmi writes in number 12, Su'udat Purim me'achrin v'lo makdimin. If you have a Purim Mishulash, let's say, right, where Tedvav falls on Shabbat, so Yerushalayim then reads the Megillah on the 14th, and the Suda is on the 16th. Right, Ma'achrin v'lo makdimin. Rabbi Zera ba'a kumi Rabbi Avo. But Rabbi Zera said, why don't you make the Suda on the 15th, which is Shabbat? V'asut on Shabbat. Amar le, he said to him, La'asot otam yimei mishteh v'simcha. Because the Pasuk says you have to make them days of feasting and rejoicing. Et shesimchato tluya b'veidin, yatza zeh shesimchato tluya b'dei shamayim. And you cannot combine the simcha of Shabbat with the simcha of Purim. Why not? No, that's not what he says.
Simchat Shabbat is side by God.
Good, because the nature of these 2 days are different. It doesn't say in Mevarv and Simcha v'Simcha, not in the Yerushalmi. It's because the nature of Simchat Shabbat is that God makes it, and the nature of Purim is you make it. Now, you could take this the way the Gemara in Beitza Yud Zayin does, which is, the Bavli against the Yerushalmi thinks, well, you know this, if Shabbat falls on Yom Tov, so how do you make the middle bracha? Of Shmoneh Esrei, Mekadesh, HaShabbat Yisrael V'Azmanim. Why HaShabbat Yisrael V'Azmanim? Why not Yisrael HaShabbat V'Azmanim?
Because Shabbat was sanctified before.
Because Shabbat Kedusha V'Kaima, because God made Shabbat Kadosh, and Yom Tov are sanctified by the courts, because we decide when the months are, so we decide when Yom Tov is. Now the Yerushalmi happens to not agree with this. The Yerushalmi in Brachot in the 9th Perek says that it's the Kadesh Yisrael HaShabbat V'Azmanim. And then you got to figure out why it says that, right? Yes, and then you have to figure out, is it Yisrael HaShabbat V'Azmanim? Which by the Bavli's logic would mean that the Yerushalmi thinks that Bnei Yisrael is Mekadesh Shabbat.
Goes against the
Maybe yes, maybe no. Because the Ramban and the Shoel and the Shuvas Harashba think that Kiddush is an act of Kiddush Shabbat. And if you look at, and it's a possible, though mechudash way of understanding, Mahalech Bamidbar, the Dailech Hakima Biramiza, and if you got that, great. If you didn't, also a shir for another time. Great sugya. One of my favorite shirim ever by Rosenzweig. It was like a 2-hour shir on a Friday night. It was amazing. But, it went till like 1:30 in the morning. It was great. You're like, that sounds wonderful. 1:30 in the morning, an Ian shir, yeah. So the Gemara says that they are anathema. You can't, right, they don't work together. Shabbat and Purim don't work together. And therefore we paskin that way. Shulchan Aruch, ve'nosim sudat Purim ad yom echad b'Shabbat. But the Karban Eidah said, well, what does it mean? Why not? So look at what the Karban Eidah says. Ve'ein nikar shekovino to l'simcha shebelav hache yom simchahu. He said, you know what the real problem is? Where's the Karban Eidah say?
You can't tell that it's
Because you won't be able to tell. So what? He doesn't say Marvin b'simcha b'simcha. What's the Karban Eidah's understanding? Why is there a problem to have Sudat Purim and Sudat Shabbat together? Because it won't be recognizable. People won't understand what you're doing. Why is that important?
I mean, that's
Thank you. That was a rhetorical question. That's exactly my point. Is that according to what we've been arguing, that the Su'udah is a function of Bersumanes, that actually would nullify the entire purpose of the Su'udah. It's not just you have to rejoice. If it was you had to rejoice, so maybe you could say the reason you can't have Shabbat and Sudat Purim is Ein Marvin Simcha B'Simcha. But that's not the problem, according to the Karban Eidah. It's that people will look at the Suda and not know why you're celebrating. And that nullifies the entire purpose, because the nature of Sudat Purim is Pirsumei Nisa. If you look at the Marot Natan in 15, it says, Ve'ein lakshut, madua b'shabbat osin Sudat nisuinu brit milah. And he says, so why, and he comes at it from a different angle. He says, so why is it that you are allowed to make Sheva Brachot on Shabbat? Or a Sudat Brit Milah on Shabbat? If it was a problem of Ein Marvin Simcha B'Simcha, you shouldn't be able to have a Shabbat Su'udah with other Su'udot Mitzvah, but you're allowed to. Like, no one ever said, if you're having a Sudat Brit on Shabbat, so you need to wash for the Brit, bench, and then wash again for lunch, and then again for Sudat Shlishit. It's like, you can imagine this on a winter Shabbos, like Mitaraf. It's crazy, right? Like, it's insane. Right? You have 3 meals during the day. It's bad enough having 2. That's why the Aruch HaShulchan had to yell at people for not washing for Sudat Shlishit, because it's hard. Right? The Aruch HaShulchan, right, says anyone who doesn't wash, this is the battle he fought. Right? Anyone who doesn't, what does the Aruch HaShulchan say about people who don't wash for Sudat Shlishit? Atid litein adin. Right? For that, he says, you will pay in Shamayim, because that was the crime. That does ring in my head every time I make sure to wash, even though I'm stuffed beyond stuffed. But he says, why is it that other Sudot Mitzvah you're allowed to have on Shabbat but not Purim? He says, it's very simple. Because only by Purim, where you have to make them days of rejoicing, for Pirsum presumably, you need it to be distinct, recognizable. Aval Sudat Shabbat lo tzarech heker. You don't have to, right? Shabbat, Mila, wedding, who cares? Now, it is true that the Gemara in Moed Katan argues that the reason you don't get married on Yom Tov, on Chol HaMoed, is because of Ein Marvin Simcha V'Simcha, or Shenemar V'Samachto B'Chagecha, V'lo B'Ishtecha. There's different formulations. Either you don't mix Simchot, or there's a special Gzeirah HaKatuv that you rejoice on the Chag and not with your new wife. Ula says, Mipnei HaTorach, it's just too much work. Right? We don't want you to be working, putting that much, right? The days before a wedding are stressful. We don't want that on Yom Tov. If you look at Tosfot there says, Usudat Brit Milah mutar lasot b'chol hamoed. Deleka simcha. Kedamrin and Berakama diktubot l'mavarchen shesimcha b'meono. Mishum d'it leitzara liyanuka. He says, so why is it that you're allowed to make a Sudat Brit Milah on Chol HaMoed, if you're not allowed to be ma'arif simcha b'simcha.
There's no simcha.
So answer one, there is not that much simcha because the baby's crying. Your simcha is is reduced. Inami, kevan shizmano kavua in levatel zeh b'vnei zeh. Possibility two is, what choice did you have? The baby was born. This is the 8th day. What do you want from my life? Right? It falls when it falls. Okay? Like, Chol HaMoed's not ideal, but it is what it is. It's actually really not easy to make a Sudat Brit Milah on Pesach. It's not the worst day. The worst day to have a Brit ever is... No, not Tisha B'Av. Erev Pesach. Erev Pesach. Because you need to wash, but it can't be matzah, maker adin. So it has to be bread. Right? It's a nightmare. Right? I know... I was terrified with Ezra. It'd be that his bris was 3 days before Pesach. It was very close. It was very, very close. I was terrified because I knew someone in Toronto who had done it. He said it was terrible. Like he ran around Erev Pesach, found all the last bagels, thought 10 people would show up at his house, and like 100 people showed up at his house, and there's like crumbs of bagels falling over his house because no venue would do it. I told Ara, I was like, if we have a boy and he's born like and the bris is Erev Pesach, like we are just like having a Suda next to the bonfire, and just like you can have a kazaiza bread and throw it in the fire. Like it's just
Why can't it be matzah?
because you're not allowed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach, Mikra Din.
Right.
That's why. That's the problem. Right before that, it's din minhag, but Erev Pesach is Mikra Din. Okay. So Tosfos answer one is that it's not so joyous. Answer two is that you don't have a choice. Answer three is that maybe we don't paskin ein ma'ariv and simcha b'simcha, but rather we think the issue is the gzerat hakatuv of b'chagecha v'lo b'ishtecha. Or four is the only suda which is joyous enough is sudat nisuim. Okay. Keep that in mind. Shulchan Aruch says, but mutar lisa isha b'purim. But you are allowed to get married on Purim. And the Ramah says, bein b'yudalet, bein b'tedvav, v'kol shegen, shmutar lasot pidyon haben. So now tell me why. Does that make any sense?
No.
So this is already a little bit strange. So the Magen Avraham says, why not? I don't understand. You're not allowed to make the Sudat Purim on Shabbat. So why should I allow to get married on Shabbat? Aren't I going to have the same problem? She says, "V'li nired lo dami dahata matam dimkein lote Sudat Purim nikeret. Aval hacha ma bekachem lote Sudat hanusin nisuin nikeret." Said, no, it's not a problem. Why not? Because which one won't be nikar? The wedding. It's a big deal. A wedding suda doesn't need to be recognizable. So you have a Purim suda and you make Shever Brachot. So people won't realize it's Shever Brachot. Who cares? It'll be defined and viewed by other people as a Purim suda. And that's all I care about. It's not about Ma'arvin. I'm allowed to be Ma'ariv other things with Purim Simcha. What I need to make sure is that Purim is recognizable. On Shabbat, people will think it's Shabbat. If I make a wedding on Purim, it's Purim. It's Purim. Then he says, what about the principle of Ein Ma'arvin's Simcha b'Simcha? So he says, maybe it's only the Rabbanan, not a big deal. Okay. Look at the Mishnah Brura. V'lo dami lechag, d'chsiv v'samach le'v'chagecha v'lo b'ishtecha. But he notes that the Magen Avraham at the end, you can look, says, you know what, I really don't like it. If you can avoid it, maybe you should avoid it. So he says the halacha, that is indeed the minhag. The Chemin Moshe says maybe do it at the end of Purim, fine. But look at 21. In the Kovit Beit Aaron, Rabbi Pinchas Lipshitz writes the following. He says, "V'tzarech lechalek. Didavka suudat Shabbat usudat Purim einam olchim yachtav." Maybe it's only Shabbat and Purim that don't go together. Dibishnehem yom hakagarm lekviyat ha'seudah. Because in both of them, it's the day that brings about the seudah. Lechein suudat yom ha'Shabbat ein l'tzarifim suudat yom ha'Purim. Ma she'en gem suudat milah v'chodome harei kviyat ha'seudah mishum me'orash al mitzvah she'ikba b'yom zeh. He said maybe they're just different. You can't mix days, but you can mix an event and a day. V'shabi yachol lechavim is gam simchas mitzvah shel milah shikim b'oto yom. And he said, at the end of the day, both of them are simcha shel mitzvah. So who cares? They will integrate into the same simcha mitzvah. The point is that by Shabbat, it's a Shabbos meal. But maybe the argument is that Purim and Milah are both simcha shel mitzvah. And maybe that'll be enough. Because maybe, and I don't know if I would buy this formulation, but maybe, he argues, they do integrate because they're doing the same thing. Is they're expressing simcha shel mitzvah. The Ramosha Sternbach, and we'll finish with this, which is also the last source, which is good, says this slightly differently. He says, "Amnam nir'esh yisudat milah yisodal harot shesamach b'mitzvah Hashem." He said, maybe specifically milah works on Purim because what's the purpose of the sudat of the bris milah? To show that you're rejoicing in the mitzvah of God. That even though the baby is crying, you're happy because of the mitzvah. עצם הדבר ששמח בעוד שחבלו בנו יצא עיקר המכוון דשמחה בסעודת מילה שאין על קיום מצווה לבד שזה לא מצינו לעשות סעודה לכל מצווה etc. And therefore he says the reason that it's okay on Purim is because לפי זה אדרבה עיקר הסעודה סמוך למילה דאף שעד החבל בבנו מקומו כבר מיד עושה שמחה. Right. So what does he argue? He argues that fundamentally, maybe the key is that the type of joy that you have on Purim is not only about Purim. You have it at a Simchat Brit Milah. And maybe the reason you do it is because they actually integrate. And that type of tshuva, I think, points to the notion that maybe this value, that celebration as an expression of Pirsum Hanes, is in fact a universal value. On Purim it defines the day, but it's the key behind things like Sudat Brit Milah. And that seems to be what Ramosha Sternbach is getting at. L'maisa, he says that if you want to be yotzei all the day, there's an easy way, which is to maybe add extra foods, right? Make it clear that this is a double simcha, and then you can, l'maisa, make the point if you want to. But I think fundamentally what we see from this is that Pirsum Hanes is more than just about telling the miracle. It's about internalizing it, contextualizing it, and showing the world what it actually means to believe that Hashem did Nisim, or to celebrate mitzvot, and that, our very state of being on Purim, is the ultimate expression of Pirsum Hanes. With that, a Purim Sameach to all the people I won't talk to. You guys, I'll tell you again later. But